Join John Carson every weekday as he takes us on a journey through the Bible.
Whoever shall seek to save his life, if you go back to living for yourself, you're going to lose it. But whoever shall lose his life, give up his life for my sake, he shall preserve it.
Enjoy interesting, knowledge-packed, yet simple teachings through his humor and in-depth understanding of God's Word.
The last people that tried to put God in a box, literally, he rose again. He wouldn't stay in their compartment. If God was small enough for me to figure out, he wouldn't be big enough for me to worship.
Tune in to Hope TV for John Carson every 10 p.m., 4 a.m., and 10 a.m. weekdays on Hope TV, where you look and live.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Like we say on this show, it all depends the time zone where you are watching. Welcome to The Leader, courtesy of Catalid and the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, EAK, on this day when we are encouraged to be planting trees. I'm Edmund Mudibo. Leader burnout. Wow. That subject, many of us can identify with it. Much more so me, and I'm privileged to have with me in studio today Christina Were. Karibu sana.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. You don't look burnt out.
We'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
I know Christina and you might tent, but then those guys are watching us. Who is Christina Were?
Wow, that's always a difficult question to answer, but maybe okay. Christina is a child of God. I'm born again. I'm the founder of an organization called TC3 Africa. And at TC3 Africa, we focus on change leadership, well-being in the workplace, so leader wellness specifically, and family caregiver wellness. Yeah.
So, but let's start with the journey, because that seems to me like something that you dove into that is driven by passion, if I may, but you have the liberty to edit out sections of your life journey. Take us through your life journey to where you're at in terms of your career, your schooling, your social life, and otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I got into leadership at a young age, in church activities, church leadership as a young person, and then in the workplace, just sort of rising through the ranks. In terms of my career and my work experience, a lot of my work experience has been in human resources, corporate strategy, and process improvement. And so rising up to C-suite in different sectors. I've worked in not-for-profit and profit. I've worked in the energy sector. I've worked in the hospitality sector. I've worked in manufacturing. We called it manufacturing, but yeah, we were printing money. That was Delarue and passports and cards and things like that.
I almost felt like asking that if you could get me to, I could be your friend. When you say you print money.
Yeah, well, the money belonged to the government of Kenya. It wasn't ours.
Yes.
And then also worked in healthcare. I serve as the chair lady of the Council for Scripture Union of Kenya, which is a faith-based organization that works particularly with children, young people and families. But in Kenya, we focus a lot on children and families in churches and in Bible clubs. Yes, that's a little bit of who I am in a nutshell. Yes. I am a certified mental health coach. And I have lived experience in terms of leader burnout, so it's not theoretical for me, and also lived experience as a family caregiver, I support people who have got family members living with debilitating illness, mental or physical, or who are living with addictions, alcohol, substance, behavioral addictions. So supporting the family members, because there's a lot of mental health and practical issues around being a family caregiver. Yeah.
Indeed, and what a coincidence, and this must be divine, because the month of May is really all about mental wealth, mental wellness, mental health, and this is very appropriate. Now, burnout. When does burnout begin? Do we have burnout in children, in the family? What are the signs and symptoms? How would you define burnout?
It is a syndrome or a state of exhaustion, extreme exhaustion, physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual exhaustion that is caused by chronic or prolonged or excessive stress. So that's what burnout is. And so it is possible to be burnt out. I know sometimes people think about burnout, and because we're talking about leaders, they think about the big kahuna or the big kahunares, you know, the senior leaders only. But it is possible to suffer burnout when you don't necessarily have to be in a position of leadership. So long as you're exposed to chronic stress, to excessive stress, work-related stress, and work is not just employment. And so, because we often think about work in the context of having a job, but work is expending energy to do something. So I could be a farmer. I'm not working in this corporate organization, but I'm a farmer. And can you imagine the stress that farmers are going through right now with the floods?
Yeah.
Where
Stress.
the floods have swept away people's shambas. They've just been planting. That stress can cause them to burn out. And because burnout, one of the things that triggers burnout is also when you're working on something that feels meaningless, purposeless. So I've planted, I took a loan maybe for my fertilizer, I paid casual workers, and now the farm is flooded or the farm got swept away. So burnout is not just in an employment context, it is in a work context, and that therefore broadens where burnout, can occur. Yeah.
Can I stretch it? I mean, I like that. You said not necessarily just job, work context, even relational.
Yeah.
Can you have burnout? Unaambia your spouse, hapa imechoma.
Now, Edmund, I don't know that.
Or you're not allowed to have burnout in that space.
Hey, I think now there, I would need to think about it very carefully.
Yes.
You could be burnt out in a relationship because of context in the relationship that could cause excessive stress. For example, let me give a context I'm familiar with, the caregiving space. If you're taking care of a spouse who's living with a terminal illness or living with a mental health condition or living with addiction, or a child or a parent-in-law or a parent, the response, the weight of taking care of that person, are they on their medication? Why are they deteriorating? Do we need to get a second opinion? Are we flying them out of the country? Are they dying, not dying? I remember reading this story 2-3 years ago about the mother of a French footballer in France. The son, I think, got a stroke or something, but had been in a coma for close to 30 years. Imagine you're taking care of that person. You could burn out. It might just be that what the burnout would be around compassion fatigue, around the caregiving space. You're taking care of a child with special needs. It has been said, there's a research that I read that said that parents of children with autism, whether the children are young or whether they are grown up, but they're still their children, have got the same stress levels as soldiers in combat.
Wow.
Parents of children with autism, same stress levels as soldiers in combat. So their stress levels are the same as soldiers in Gaza, in Ukraine, in South Sudan, in DRC. Yes, you can burn out in a relationship.
No, but some of us can actually be going through it and we don't even realize that we're going through burnout.
Yes.
Is it obvious that, Amma, you need to be away from what I'd say, the median where everybody, majority are for you to be different?
It's not obvious. It creeps in on you. And even from my own experience with burnout in the workplace, is that it creeps in on you. And so you may not realize, you know this, you may not realize that the pressure is building up. You may not realize that the pressure is building up. You may not realize that it's contorting you. And you know, even when we talk about resilience, people talk about resilience, but often talk about it in the context of being tough as nails,
thick skin,
strong. You know, there's even an advert about some steel roads in Kenya where, you know, they say, Kama something, you know.
Yes.
But that's not what resilience is.
No.
Resilience is not being hard as nails. It's not being what I was facilitating a leader burnout workshop, and one of the gentlemen said, you know, Christina, for us as men, we were having a conversation, and we said that we just have to die like soldiers. To use the slang parlance, he said, kukufa ki soldier. We just die like soldiers. Yeah. And so it creeps on you, and you may not recognize that it's creeping on you. Some of the signs that you could be burning out could be changes in your temperament. Maybe you're having fits of rage, anger outbursts, irritability, loss of interest in things that used to be of interest. Suddenly your hobbies are no longer interesting to you. And you might not even recognize, oh, I used to enjoy reading, but now I can have 20 books by the bedside and I'm still adding more, but somehow I just don't have the energy to read or to do whatever other activities. It could be even loss of, you know, almost operating on autopilot. It could be physical in terms of you could be oversleeping or undersleeping. You could find you're overeating or undereating. And you know, I think in many of our contexts, when you're putting on weight, people say you're doing well, but you might actually be putting on weight because you're overeating.
You're doing badly.
You could also be putting on weight. You may not be overeating, but because you're not sleeping,
oh yes,
the stress hormones, the cortisol, are up. And so it ends up in a weight gain issue. But we will interpret that since you got that big job and you're putting on weight, you're doing well. But it might actually be stress that is taking its toll on you. It has been said that recently, like in Kenya, increasingly a lot of mental health facilities are seeing, and even doctors, physicians, are seeing many leaders suffering from type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, you know, strokes, and it's stress related, because what you don't process, somehow the body will start to process. You may also find things like decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is brain fog. Let me start with brain fog, where your brain is foggy, you find it takes longer to make decisions, there's lack of clarity. And what happens with decision fatigue? Decision fatigue is actually a whole thing by itself. And for leaders, it has got serious consequences for them and for the people they lead. So decision fatigue, you find slowly you get tired of making decisions. And so you may wait until the last minute. People are waiting, there's this crisis, and we're waiting for Edmund to tell us. And Edmund just doesn't have the energy. And you might be wondering what's happening. And until the last minute, then suddenly you make this decision, boom. The decisions might not be very sound. Or it's you're so exhausted, you sort of let the status quo be. Let things just flow. That's another sign of decision fatigue. Or where you're just like, I don't have the energy to work through this, do whatever you want. So you allow people to do whatever they want. And so decision fatigue is one of the signs of burnout. And you can imagine the consequences on the people you're leading, your team, your organization, procrastinating. And if naturally you are not a procrastinator, then you start seeing this, that's a warning sign. I think for the whole thing of understanding yourself is a lifelong journey. And so sometimes the signs are so subtle that if you don't take time to pause and say, hey, what's shifting here? How come nowadays I'm so intolerant? I used to be so likable. Nowadays people don't like me and I don't like myself, even me. I look in the mirror and I say, I don't like myself. So what's going on here? And those could be signs of burnout, that you're burning out, that really you're running on empty. And it's kind of like a car. Well, now they're electronic vehicles, but even those ones need to be charged, right? If you run out of the wiper fluid, you'll just scratch your windscreen.
The windshield, yeah, that's right.
But if you run out of petrol, you can leave the car embarrassingly on the highway, run with your jerrycan. Although nowadays I don't think we're allowed to carry plastic jerrycans, but run with your jerrycan, get fuel and put it in.
That's when you start trending.
But if you run out of engine oil, it's a knockout.
That's a knockout.
An engine knock.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about burnout, that we can spend time attending to the washer fluid, the petrol. We can get through embarrassing situations and we refill the fuel tank on the highway. But if we forget the engine oil, we suffer an engine knock, which can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be spiritual. And sometimes it might not be that we neglected, it might be that we found ourselves in a very intense kind of situation that took a toll on us. Think about one of the triggers, one of the factors of burnout is also working in a helping profession. Nurses,
Yes.
doctors, teachers, policemen, people in the emergency services. Because what happens is when you're helping people, there's a lot of emotional weight. Sometimes they're life and death situations. And maybe that's why sometimes we look at doctors and we think they are so unfeeling. But, and we talk about making clinical decisions clinically, like make the decision clinically without emotions. But these are human beings.
They're human beings.
And you can imagine if you have to advise a family whether we need to switch off the life support or not.
Difficult decisions.
It's difficult. And so what happens for many of those people is it gets buried in the back of their mind or their head. But one day it comes out. You can imagine the police who have to pick up mangled bodies.
Yeah.
How you know, that's very weighty. And so one of the exciting things, for example, with our National Police Service is now they are big on chaplaincy within the police service and on psychologists and things. But those kinds of things contribute to burnout. Situations that have got very complex decisions. And for leaders, you can imagine, here you are, it's 2024, you're just recovering from COVID. Then there was the war in Ukraine, it's affecting your supply chain, the inflation rates, the exchange rates, regulatory issues, new tax regimes, and this is happening across countries. It's not unique to Kenya. And you're a leader in that context. And then you're having to make decisions. Will we be able to grow our business? Are we shutting shop? Are we relocating? Are we firing people? Are we declaring redundancies? How are we paying these loans? Decisions which, when you make them, you have to come and appear calm and composed. But when you go home, you're thinking about, wow, those 5 people, those 10 people, those 100 people who will be going home to nothing at a time like this. And it weighs you down. Decisions that have got conflicting interests. You're balancing all these political interests, all these people have got different, interests
And expectations.
And you're balancing all those. Those contribute to burnout. But as the leader, you're supposed to look all put together. In fact, we'll tell you sarcastically, if the kitchen is too hot, get out. I remember being in a situation where I had joined this organization and they were just about to shut down some of their branches.
Wow.
They never told me.
Whoa.
So I arrived, and on the first day, my colleague in finance tells me, okay, you're doing orientation, but you see this pink file? When you finish orientation on Thursday, you need to fire this guy. And I'm like, okay.
You hardly go in and you're kicking
this
guys
is day
out.
1. And then week 2, I'm told that, you know what, yeah, we are retrenching, we're shutting some branches. And okay, I have to do it because it's part of my work.
Yeah.
But you can imagine, it's like, oh, the new head of HR has come and
with a new
is
broom.
firing people. And in most organizations, HR is hiring and firing. That's how people view it, right? So you've arrived and, oh, you're firing people. And of course, the boss is conveniently making it look like
It is
HR has recommended that we need this change.
we need.
And I remember we were to go with my colleague, a line manager, to one of the branches outside of Nairobi and let the people know that we are declaring them redundant, and at the same time talk to clients and say, we're really sorry,
Really
but
trying
these
to
are
have
the
continuity,
options,
but
etc., etc.
difficult, but must be made.
And my colleague who was in charge of that particular business line conveniently did not show up at the airport.
So they allowed you to take ownership
And
of that.
called while we had boarded and said, oh, where are you guys? Say, we've boarded, we're about to take off. Oh, okay. So we go for this difficult exercise, let go of the staff, deal with angry clients who think, so you're the new person who reported we didn't, is this how you'll take care of people in this organization, and so on and so forth. And then come back, and at the next senior leadership meeting, 2 or 3 days later, when the CEO asks, so how did it go? My colleague pipes up, oh, it went very well, we've released the staff, and I flipped. I flipped totally.
Where were you?
Yeah, I flipped.
Yeah.
And I left the meeting room. And one other colleague came after the meeting and told me, you don't have permission to lose it. You're the one who's supposed to be composed. If you lose it, what happens to the rest of us? You're the one who we come to unburden to.
Wow.
You do not have permission to lose it. What an expectation for a leader, that you must always look like you're put together. You don't have space to fall apart. You don't have, who do you go to? And some leaders are in those positions where, who do I go to in the event of a crisis? Situations where you don't have, you're expected to do your work. You are at risk for being attacked for doing your work, but you do not have the space to defend yourself.
Wow. Very difficult.
And you're thrown under the bus. We see that happening a lot where, for example, in political settings, where a certain person in authority is given an opportunity to make an announcement to test the waters and see how the 190 will react.
Yeah. So you can be the fall guy.
You can be the fall guy.
If it works, it is us. If it doesn't work, it is you.
Yes, and it happens in corporates as well.
Oh, yeah.
It happens in if you're a school prefect.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe the principal makes you as the prefect to make an announcement.
Make this announcement.
And all the students, now they hate you. But the school principal will escape. And the school principal will come out like they are the hero or the heroine.
To rescue them.
So those kinds of situations. So burnout is not just about being overworked. There are many things that can contribute to somebody suffering burnout.
Now when there are those, then finally you realize, even maybe you don't, but you escape into new things suddenly that are unexplainable, new hobbies, or just switch off, or you switch on other things. Does that happen?
Yes. And I think the place of having professional help, coaches, mentors who know these things, therapists is something that we need to embrace and not wait until we are unwell or badly off to get help. It happens, unhealthy coping mechanisms. So you may find that you're coping. Interestingly, you could cope by overworking even more. You may be suffering workplace burnout because it's an escape mechanism for another crisis that you're dealing with, maybe on the home front or on the social front. It's your way of escape. Alcohol addiction, smoking, drugs, behavioral addictions, those are the ones that are really tricky. Shopping, overeating, even over-exercising.
Yeah.
pornography, internet addiction. And now internet addiction disorder is officially recognized as a disorder. Gaming addiction is also recognized officially as a disorder. So behavioral addictions, it's so important to be able to know how are you self-medicating? Because that's what is the natural thing to do. Withdrawing socially from people, from family, from friends, that's another unhealthy coping mechanism. Gambling, betting. Now, I'm not saying all this only occur because of burnout. I'm just saying that those could be the
yes,
those could be your unhealthy your ways of self-medicating. Yeah, and of course, you know, your body. If you don't find a way to cope, even if it's an unhealthy way, then your body will begin to speak out loud. And sometimes people just drop.
And suddenly we see Christina going bungee jumping, and you never used to, and you wonder, okay, you want to take life to the edge so that you have a sense of release, you've conquered.
Yes, yes.
And because you have, then you think your threshold is up there.
But you know, I might
increased.
go for bungee. It might be good for me to go for bungee jumping, because maybe as I'm screaming, as I go down,
Let's go.
I'm actually screaming at this boss or at this situation, you know. But yeah, I think recognizing when it's unhealthy. Yeah.
But you need people around you who are honest enough that you have a relationship with, who can be able to reach out one way or the other, and you also to be vulnerable enough.
True.
That then you've got that community around you.
It's very true. Very true. The thing is that you may not be recognizing what's happening, and neither may they. And so you may find conflict in marriage, you might find conflict with children, conflict with colleagues, and so you know, the workplace culture becomes, I don't want to use the word toxic because we use it so loosely nowadays, but there's tension. And people are just thinking, oh, you've become so cranky nowadays. Oh, you need to sort out your issues. But you see, if they also don't recognize what is happening, and you don't recognize what is happening, it becomes very tricky. And I think that's where all these conversations around mental health, mental well-being, and even now when we're looking at it from the perspective of leaders, then it helps a lot, because the Bible says people perish for lack of knowledge.
Now they're talking about the Bible.
Yeah.
Examples, situations, scenarios of people who, so we know we're not, you know, a good book is alive and, you know.
My favorite example, okay, I've got two examples I really like. One is Elijah, and one is Jesus. When you look at the story of Elijah and after the prophets of Baal, people say, imagine, the guy, you know, called down fire from heaven and did all this, killed all the prophets of Baal, built this altar, soaked it with water, killed this bull, you know, all of those things. And then people say, and then a woman just said, Elijah, I'm coming from your neck. And he fled. What kind of a guy was that? But when I look at the story of Elijah, I see a classic story of burnout, and I also see a classic, as scriptural example of how God handles burnout. Elijah told, I think, Obadiah, who worked in the king's household, tell the king that I'm here. Obadiah said, who, me? You want me to go and tell the king? Do you not know what happened to the last people? Do you want me to be dead?
Deleted.
I am not going. And Elijah says, no, just go. What is one of the triggers for burnout? Situations where nobody understands what you're going through. Situations where you're on your own, where you're carrying weight by yourself. And so Elijah is now on his own. So, of course, all the whatever happens, and then there's this whole thing with the prophets of Baal. Now, I know people also say there were 7,000 other prophets, and Elijah was like, oh, I'm alone, I'm alone. But if you look at the way the scripture is ordered, God did not tell Elijah right from the beginning, why are you whining here and there are 7 other prophets who have not bowed down to Baal? No. Because think about it, Edmund. The way the story is recounted in the scripture, there were all this audience cheering the prophets of Baal, waiting to see Elijah being mentioned. Situations where you stick out your neck and you're alone.
Yeah.
Nobody's supporting you. We are not told that they were the 7,000 prophets who are also there cheering
talk
him.
about him.
Then all the other Israelites are there watching to see, so what? Let's see, what is this you're doing? The scripture says the prophets of Baal chanted, did what the whole day, and there was a cheering squad. Yeah. Elijah was alone. He built the altar alone, carried the water. I think the only place where he got help was when they were bringing the water. He gingered the bull alone. He engaged in spiritual warfare alone. When he was, putting your neck out. Supposing, when King Daniel said, if God doesn't rescue me, supposing God was decided, I'm not sending the fire, but I have dared to trust God publicly. He was alone. Then physical exhaustion, putting up this altar, 12 stones, building it. We are not told anybody assisted him. Gingering the bull. The prophets of Baal had supporters. There were 400. There were people cheering them, etc. He was alone. Then he calls, and fire comes from heaven. That's one of the other things about exhaustion or burnout is that sometimes it can happen after an experience of extreme success. It's not just because of something that weighed you down. This extraordinary thing, which took all his spiritual, physical, and emotional energy, and the risk that supposing the Lord chooses not to. The way King Daniel said, even if he doesn't rescue us, he didn't know how God would answer, but he exercised that faith. Now that is exhaustion. Exhaustion. When Jezebel said, I'm coming for your neck, this is somebody who was expended spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, and he was alone. There had been no cheering squad for him. Burnout, remember I mentioned situations where you absorb things for other people. He had absorbed a lot spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally. Then he just wants to go and die. Look at how God handles him. Wakes him up. Well, what you doing here? I just want to die. I'm the only prophet. God doesn't say, oh, shut up. What do you mean? Don't you know there are 7,000? God says, wake up, eat, drink water, sleep. Now, what do psychologists and health professionals and all those people say? And I am a certified mental health coach. Important things for your wellness, the basics. Hydrate, drink water. It's important for your brain, to clear the brain, you clarity for your body function. It's important for your sleep. It's important for your mood. Just think about the times when you're dehydrated and how cranky you are. Look at it even in children. What does God do? Wake up, drink water. Nutrition. Eat healthy. Eat healthy. We tend to eat junk or to eat odd meals. And if you work shift patterns like people in medical, in the forces and things like that, then shift patterns really make your mental health go out of kilter. And so eat healthy. What does God do? Sends ravens with freshly baked bread. I'm sure it was gluten-free and sugar-free, and all of those things,
Stuff,
and healthy. And comfort food. The fresh bread smells nice. The Lord sends fresh bread to Elijah. And then the Lord allows him to sleep. Sleep is so important for your well-being. It's so important. And the thing with healthy nutrition, they say the gut is our second brain, right? One of the things that many mental health professionals would want to do when you want to see them is to be sure that there's no issue with your gut health. Because when your gut health is out of kilter, the chemicals in your brain, the hormones in your brains also go out of kilter. And so here is God making sure Elijah is well fed, he's hydrated, he allows him to sleep. He doesn't start blasting him. What do you mean? Are you the one who answered, or am I the one who sent fire for you? Are you forgetting that it is me who answered your prayer? God didn't do that. God allows him to sleep. And then he wakes him up again. Elijah, what are you doing here? I'm alone. I just want to die. Da, 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 da. Another thing about burnout and mental health, communicate, have community. Remember the question you said about community? So he was just having this conversation with God. And sometimes you're so down deeply, it's not enough to have one conversation. You may need to go for counseling. You may need to keep talking to God about it so many times. You may need to go for therapy. You may need to have a coaching journey. It's not just snap out of it. And we have this tendency to say, Edmund, so many people are struggling with this. Snap out of it. Get a grip. We are so intolerant. But see how God took care of Elijah. They talked. Okay, sleep, eat, drink. Yeah. Another time, so what are you doing here? I'm alone, I'm tired, I just want to die. Decision. Now this is where it's very interesting how God helps him. Because God allows him to eat, drink again. And then God tells him, now this is what you will do. Because when you're burnt out, decision fatigue. You don't even know how to make decisions, you're exhausted. So God tells him, now go. You will anoint so-and-so king, and you will anoint so-and-so as your assistant.
Delegation.
God raises support. Not only tells him delegate, he raises support system.
Right.
And sometimes we need to help people. And like for leaders, because leadership is very lonely, leaders need help and need to be intentional. How do I build this support system? People who connect with the loneliness of leadership. People who I can trust with the sharing the conflicting demands of my job, you know. And sometimes you don't want to be carrying all the work stress even to your spouse, even if your spouse might be your best friend, because it might become overwhelming, you know. So see how God helps Elijah, creates a support system for him. And the scripture is interesting. It was only around that point that it says there were 7,000. God didn't tell Elijah, get a grip. What do you mean? Don't you know there are 7,000? In any case, from where that story starts, we don't see the 7,000 prophets standing by him.
No, we don't.
So for me, that's a classic example of a burnout situation, and why it then looked like something so small made him flee, right? But also how God handles burnout. So even when psychologists, psychiatrists, physicians are telling us, eat well, sleep, get rest, see, God did it. Have community, have a support system, help somebody think through the decisions. So this is what you're going to do, anoint the. When he was anointing Elisha, it was not because of failure. It was because you need somebody to walk with you. And see how God carried him. If God was really mad with him, I wonder if he would actually have given him this grand entrance to heaven with chariots of fire. Because sometimes people say, you see, now even Elisha was anointed because this guy. I don't think so. I think God was creating a support system and continuity. Let's look at Jesus when we look at coping with the stresses of leadership. Luke chapter 4 has got an interesting story where Jesus has gone to retreat. So the place of introspection, guard your time. Be so intentional about having alone time. And you know what they say, that if you want to get things done, get a busy person. So busy people keep being called. You're put on more boards, more committees, more this, that, more, more CSR activities, many more things. But Jesus has gone to retreat, and the people follow him. And they say, come, stay here. And then you know what he says? He says, no, I can't stay here. I've been called to other cities also. So retreating helps you to keep connecting with your purpose. There are so many good things you can do as a leader, but do you have to do it? It's great to have an open door policy, but I think we learn from Jesus that sometimes have a closed door policy.
You need to have time.
And say, no,
time.
This is a very, you want me to, the reason they were looking for Jesus was he was doing great things, and they wanted him to do more great things there.
That was their interest.
But he says, no, I have been called to other cities as well. So they weren't asking him to do bad things. And you see, as leaders, the more we succeed, the more people want a piece of us. And so being able to say, thank you for asking, but no. Or telling your PA, clear the diary, I'm not taking any calls, I'm not having any meetings. It is okay to have a closed door policy sometimes. Or you have the example where the blind Bartimaeus, Jesus,
Oh,
son
yeah.
of David, have mercy on me.
Yes.
What do most of us do when we see a crisis? We swoop in with our solution. But Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you?
What do you want me to
Do you
do?
know, you would have thought he wants money. So he's broke, he's a beggar. But maybe, no, I'm alone because I'm blind, I'm poor, I wish I could be married. Maybe he wanted a spouse. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he needed a house. I mean, but Jesus didn't just swoop in and say, it's a beggar here. He asked, what do you want? And what he wanted was, I want to see.
Just want to see.
And so even as leaders, to be careful not to fall in the trap of fixing everybody and fixing everything. Sometimes understand what is the real issue.
What is the issue?
And that's so key with
Discernment.
individuals. It's also key when you're doing community projects, community interventions. You might think that this community needs water, but maybe that's not the issue. It looks like the issue is they need water. It looks like the issue is they need education. It looks like the issue is they need a school. But maybe that is not the issue.
That may not be it.
Yeah,
that is
so being
required.
careful to understand what is it, so that you don't expend energy just doing anything and everything. And then the person is like, who told you I want money? Me, I wanted to see. And then you struggle with, they don't even appreciate what I've done for them. I thought I did well. Or as leaders, when we sort people out, sometimes we feel they should follow us. So again on Jesus, remember, what was this guy who had legions of demons, the demoniacs. In fact, some people call him the demoniac.
Yes.
And after he's delivered, he's so excited and he wants to follow Jesus. But Jesus says, no, go home. Now, two things for me stand out there. And then the guy went and preached in the Decapolis about what Jesus did. So 10 cities had about the Lord Jesus Christ. They might not have had if he had followed Jesus.
Oh, yeah. But they got opportunity now to hear
But
the
now
good
they
news.
had the good news because Jesus told him no. And so sometimes no is the right answer. And not everybody we assist needs to be following us. Sometimes we assist and we should learn to release them because their purpose is elsewhere. But this guy, remember, he had been living in the hills, in the graves. He was in a mental state. He was demon-possessed. So he had been living in isolation, in rejection, in abandonment, in shame. And part of the healing journey, beyond being delivered from the demonic influence, was also reconnecting back with family, reconnecting with society, a wholesome life. So for me, those examples of Jesus, and there are many others, speak to how we should exercise balance, how we make decisions, the place of introspection, the place of, yes, be accessible, but sometimes say no, the place of not fixing everything, the place of recognizing the great things you do, the more people will want a piece of you, but you need to be able to say, thank you, but that is not what I'm called to. I need to go to the other cities. Yeah.
Now, pastors, our shepherds, who fills their cup? There's so much demand on them. I mean, my late mom was a teacher, and I can imagine 6 boys. I mean, I have 2. That's a handful. You go to class, 50, 60, pastors, hundreds, thousands. There's so much we demand of them. And some are in full-time ministry, yes, but others you find that there's other callings, other giftings that they have, but they also are ministers. Do they go through burnout?
Yes, absolutely.
So they preach more, with more fire.
They go through burnout. They go through burnout because of the emotional energy they expend, the spiritual energy they expend, the physical, the financial. They go through burnout because they deal with complicated issues. Some issues, I mean, they're just really complicated and draining. They go through burnout because people expect the pastor to be all things to all people.
Supernatural, superhuman.
You're supposed to understand me, to be there for me. You're supposed to love me. You should not rebuke me. I mean, you're not supposed to make mistakes. You know, we put them on a pedestal. We don't allow them to be human. And so pastors go through burnout. pastors go through mental health issues. Pastors also have situations in their families. They are caregivers. They are caring for family members who are unwell. They are, physical illness, mental illness, family members living with addiction. But we have very few structures in churches and in ministry that provide support. I remember hearing a pastor speak on radio, somebody speak on radio about his father who was a pastor and who died. And when they did the post-mortem, they found that his heart had enlarged, and the doctors concluded, the pathologists concluded it was likely because of the amount of stress that the pastor had been carrying over the years, the burden of responsibility. And so I think it's so important for churches to be intentional about what support systems do they have for their pastors and for their people in ministry. I think it's also important that pastors allow themselves to be human, and not to create this aura of we are superhuman.
Yeah.
I'm the one with the direct line to God. So if you want to talk to God, talk to me
It
first.
is me who has
I think
that,
it's important for pastors to allow themselves to be. Of course, they can't allow themselves to be human to all and sundry, because that's the same anyway with anybody and with anybody in a position of leadership. I think even the place of, for example, many churches will have elders' court or deacons' board or things like that.
Right.
And the chair of the elders' court. What kind of relationship do they have, and what are some of the things that they hold the pastor or the senior pastor accountable, the bishop or the apostle or whatever accountable for? Is one of the things, have you taken time to rest? Are you intentional about resting? And I think even when we look at workplaces generally, whether it's the church, whether it's ministry, whether it's the corporate space, I think that one of the performance targets for anybody, and more so those in leadership, I think everybody should have a wellness target.
Yeah.
Where did we invest in mental health coaching? Did I take time to have a balanced life with my spouse or with my family? I have the opportunity to serve as the chair of a board, and one of the things that we have purposed with the CEO, the national director, is that I hold him accountable. I say, hey, you were supposed to have taken a break in April. What happened? How are things going with your spouse?
Yes.
What's the situation like with your children? Okay, you're the CEO and we expect you to deliver, but you're also the CEO, and there are some things which are beyond your control. How are you working on accepting the things that are beyond your control? How are you equipping yourself, investing in yourself as a person? Because leading self is the most important leadership journey you will have, irrespective of your title. But the higher we go up the ranks, the more the emphasis becomes about leading others.
External as opposed to.
But you can't pour from an empty cup. It's what the scripture says: love yourself, love your neighbors, you love yourself. So if you're not investing in leading yourself, it becomes challenging to lead others. And then when you start burning out, having angry outbursts, having decision fatigue, delaying to make decisions, the same followers are the ones who are like, now look at this guy. What's wrong with our bishop? What's wrong with our pastor? What's wrong with our CEO? And so I think it's important for people in leadership to be intentional about structures and to even have a wellness measure for anybody who is in leadership, because the wellness of the leadership affects the wellness of the rest of the team. Sadly, when we look at teams and organizations and so on and so forth, we tend to look, when we say we are doing mental health awareness, it's for those people.
The others.
We don't address the wellness of the leaders. But if the leaders are not well, then
of course,
eventually the organization culture becomes unwell.
Like they say, the fish starts rotting.
Yes, exactly. So the culture of the ministry of the church will become unwell, if we are not intentional about making sure that there are wellness objectives for the people in leadership. Yeah.
A couple of things that come to mind as we begin now landing this plane is one, those who minister need to be ministered to.
Yes.
Now, talk to me about micromanagement. And some of us are OCD by nature, or so we think. The pros and cons, dangers, and especially on the political front.
Okay, I don't know about the political front, because one of the struggles I had in the workplace is that
those politics,
I couldn't handle. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, let me start with where you started about the question of micromanagement. I think it's very important to understand yourself. What is the root of your micromanaging? And when we look at leader burnout, you know, here's the thing. It's one thing to listen, but unpackaging is not head knowledge. Usually it will require coaching, an experiential kind of workshop where you use maybe creative therapy for things to come out. Because it's also not that easy for a leader to say, I need help, because it is seen as failure.
Weakness, yeah.
And people say, you see now, what is that one doing in that seat, right? But what are the things that have shaped you? What are the early childhood experiences? For example, if a 2-year-old girl and boy were falling here and playing and they fell and tripped, and they started crying, we'll tell the girl, oh, sorry, mommy, don't cry, you'll be okay. Come, I kiss your boo-boo. Sorry, sorry, sorry. But a 2-year-old boy will say, grow up, you're a man. Men don't cry. 2 years, he's a man. Men don't cry.
Surely.
So already socially we wire
We're conditioning them.
people, men, that you should not
Cry.
Yeah.
People be
But
vulnerable.
look what they say about suicide. I forget the exact statistic, but women attempt suicide many more times as men. But men are more successful at suicide. Women attempt suicide many more times as men than men.
But the men are the ones
But
who are
men
succeeding.
are more successful at suicide.
Wow.
Because men will just suddenly one day decide, I am jumping from KICC.
You delete yourself.
Yeah, or I'm shooting everybody and shooting myself. Or I'm jumping in front of the SGR or whatever. Women, it will tend to be a cry for help. And we shouldn't belittle those cries for help. Sometimes we are sarcastic about it. So how are we socialized, all right? How are we wired in terms of the wiring of men and women? What were we taught to be success? Did we see success as being sleepless nights? I remember at one point I worked in a hospital and we had children who came from this very high-end school for an afternoon of seeing life in a hospital. And as I was chatting with them and they were introducing themselves, one of them, you know, they said their names and one of them had a name that was a bit unique. And I said, oh, are you related to Dr. So-and-so? And he said, yes, that's my dad. And I said, wow, so this evening you're going to tell him that you saw, you know, the work environment and everything. And he said, if we ever get to see him.
Wow.
So what's the definition of success?
Surely, yeah.
This highly recognized, sought after specialist.
But weight matters.
But weight
You're absent.
matters. So what does that shape the definition of success for this child?
Yeah.
That I should be unavailable, etc. Or they might go the complete extreme. I am overly available for everybody, I'm a doormat, you know. So early experiences, childhood traumas, unprocessed experiences, personality types. What's my personality type? Am I one of those happy-go-lucky, I throw things in the air and leave other people to clean up? I create stress for other people, yeah? Or am I melancholic and I carry everybody's weight? Understanding your personality. So it's important to understand, how am I wired? That really helps you to unpackage how you respond to stressful situations. So what is it that causes me to micromanage? Is it an insecurity? And what is the root of that insecurity? Is it a failure? Is it criticism? Maybe I grew up with criticism all the time. Maybe I grew up being shown you're not good enough unless. So what is the root for the micromanaging? So it's easy to condemn micromanaging, but we need to help people to understand what is the root and how do they get healing? How do they maybe get coaching to unlearn and learn new things, new ways of handling things? Is it fear of control? Is it that somebody stabbed me in the back? Is it that I had this very delicate assignment and some team members messed it up, so let me just do it myself? Is it that I'm dealing with life and death situations, and so I have to be on top of how is the patient being cared for? They're on their last minutes. Or if we don't handle this situation, what will happen? Yeah.
Wow, and must it only be you? You know, the unfortunate, interesting thing about life is that, and I've said this before on this show, I think, where this young man was working in a hotel. He made sure that he was there before his boss. So if you know when you're, you notice, oh, okay, Christina is there before me, no problem. Maybe they live nearby or any no problem. And then you are the one, you realize that again, it's 6:30, people have left at 5, but Christina is still there. You will tend to notice. So this guy, the boss, one day just called this guy and said, Christina, come. And went on one of those pillars and said, do you know the purpose of this? The guy said, yeah, this thing holds the slab. And then, you know, told him, yeah, before you came, this pillar was here holding the rest. And after you leave,
it will be here.
It will still be here. Go home now. I just told him, in fact, you should never arrive before me and you should never leave after me. He had a sense of there's something that maybe the case, something is amiss in, and you can be
what we often tell people, we tell people, it's you arrive before the boss. You know, those are some of the warped organizational cultural things that we inculcate. Yeah.
In fact, I'm curious at my workplace. The one who seems to deliver without sweat, that's the guy I want to learn from. Because he must be doing something right. That somehow you can be effective without necessarily, you know, you can have some self-imposed, you know, scenarios in your own life. And what you're chasing, thinking that you're getting recognized, is actually going counter what you expect.
And you could be, your workplace could be escape from other stressors.
Yeah.
And so that's where you bury yourself in the work. The organizational culture, certain professions are very high pressure. The so-called big five looks so glamorous, but the work that it takes, you know, we hear the same thing about, I don't know if our Nairobi Stock Exchange is like that, but we are about the Wall Street.
Yes.
You know, it's cutthroat. And so those kinds of things also really play into what's the definition of success? Really, what's the definition of success? Think up, and you know, it may sound like these are things for older people, but if you look at the younger generation, the generation Alpha and the millennials, their walk and have got a greater sense of we want to have impact, we want to have purpose. That's why a lot of the very influential activists are very young people. Think about Greta Thunberg, think about the young lady from Pakistan, Malia.
Oh, yes.
And many others. There's a sense in which, unlike the older generation who would work and then say, now I want to look at purpose after I've retired. For them, many of them want purpose now.
In the now.
And one of the things about purpose is very good, but one of the things is that people who are driven by transforming the world, changing things, are also very prone to burnout because it's something that consumes them. And that's why even entrepreneurs, when you believe in your organization, you work day and night, you don't know how to rest. Even when you reach a certain level, you still don't know how to take a break because you're the vision bearer.
It can only be you.
Yeah, you've invested emotionally, sweat, blood, and tears in building this organization. And so being able to step back is difficult. And so you find burnout in entrepreneurs, you find burnout in young activists. What you said about OCD, I'm very careful about those things because we have adjectivized very serious mental health disorders. OCD is a serious mental health disorder. ADHD is a serious mental health disorder. But sometimes we have made them casual. And so people who genuinely have OCD are not able to get help. People who genuinely have ADHD, people we say, oh, it's just my split personality. People who genuinely have got schizophrenia, people who genuinely have got bipolar, are not able to get help because we've made them adjectives. And yet these are serious mental health conditions that require mental health support. So I don't know if you've got OCD, but I just had to throw that in because it's something that we use conversationally in social media and so on, but it is a serious condition that requires medical intervention. And because it requires medical intervention, then when we are interacting with people with those disorders, do we give them space?
And in fact, we're actually now really taxing on the runway to land this plane. Very quickly then, some 2-3 tips, techniques you can suggest in terms of time management, and where does one go to in seeking professional help?
Okay, time management, that's a tricky one. I think the whole thing of work-life balance is a continuous game. It's a continuous balancing act. You never get it right, 100%, right? So I would say in terms of time management, keep working on it. I think what would be key is the space to introspect, the space to pull back, because it helps you to then see where you're getting out of kilter and how to realign. It helps you to choose based on this is a new season in life and I'm shedding off this, I'm shedding off that. Or actually, although this job looks so glamorous, I need to leave it. It's costing my life, it's costing my relationships, it's costing my marriage, it's costing my mental and physical health. It's amazing the number of CEOs and C-suite leaders who only take leave when they're admitted in hospital. So I'd say in terms of time management, prioritize taking care of yourself. It's not selfish. It's not selfish to take, it's selfish to be self-centered. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. When you take care of yourself, you're better able to take care of others. Connect with God, because that's important. And Jesus, we can see how he was always connecting with God. So I think I would leave it as simple as that. In terms of it's a consistent juggling act. And the one key is to always have time for yourself so that you can figure out time for other things. And you can figure out when to have an open door, when to have a closed door, when to say no, and you don't feel guilty because you've got such a clear sense of purpose. You've got such a clear sense of the leading of the Holy Spirit. When Jesus was telling those people, no, thanks for asking, but I need to go to other cities. Or thanks, you want to follow me, but no, you go away. You know. So that's maybe that's the simplest I could keep it. I'm sorry, what was the other question?
Professional help in terms of opportunities.
Professional help.
Go to? Yeah.
I think it's time for leadership forums to be more authentic.
Yes.
One of the big conversations in the last couple of years has been authentic leadership, leadership vulnerability. I think when people are in groups of leaders, they need to stop faking it. And it's funny because we see most CEOs and we see they have made it. So we're saying fake it till you make it. But people make it and they're still faking it. So I think the place for authentic conversations, the place for being for real, putting in place, like I say, performance, have at least one performance objective. It's part of your HR structure that everybody will have a performance objective for the year that is wellness related. That is not self-development in terms of which other second degree and 50th degree have I got, or which other technical course have I done, but around my wellness, my well-being. And you see, well-being is not just mental. It could be that I need to work on my financial pillar, my social pillar, my physical health pillar, my mental health pillar, whatever of the 7 pillars that you need. I think there are 7 pillars of wellness that you need to work on. I think another thing is get coaching. And get the right coach. Maybe you need a mental health coach. Not every leadership coach is a mental health coach. Not every mental health coach is a leadership coach or an executive coach or a life coach. So get the right kind of coach that you need for your journey. Seek therapy. Don't wait until you're sick to see a therapist. The way we go for physical checkups and we tell people go for an annual checkup, have a mental health checkup.
Yeah,
Just tell the
wow.
therapist I've come to talk. There might be nothing, there might be something, but just talk, you know.
When you're talking, I was just curious. In Parliament, we had this where they said this gadget for measuring passion.
Oh, the passion
So I'm
meter
just
some years
curious,
ago.
if we were to have one for measuring burnout, what would it be? And where would you rank us?
There are actually tools for measuring burnout.
So
There are tools
where would
and
you
I think,
guesstimate
oh my goodness, that's
on a scale of 1 to 10? Where
That's
10
tricky.
is we're doing...
Shall I tell you what?
Yeah.
Right now the country is really stressed out. The floods, the efforts to catch up economically, the job situations, the business situations,
The tax.
the tax situations. Yeah, companies are relocating. Do you know that Kenya is currently the largest exporter of foreign direct investment in East Africa?
Oh, out.
Yes. Many companies are relocating to Uganda, to Tanzania, to Rwanda. So in terms of stress levels, I think the stress levels are high because of people trying to make ends meet. Of course, we are told it's a global thing, but you know, sometimes there's no comfort in numbers. You just want to take care of yourself.
You know, you can be saying all this global, but Mambo is local ground where we are.
Yeah. So at a national level, I think there are a lot of stressors, and burnout might be more, what's the word, prevalent than we realize.
How do we reach you? With all these insights, all these good people who are watching.
So I should have said, we'll also do leader burnout retreats.
Yeah.
That it's not head knowledge, it's actually experiential. To help people unpackage, to help people connect, you know, with some of the things I've talked about, right from early childhood experiences, personality, your coping mechanisms, the other things that could be feeding into your wellness situation. So we help people to either recognize, prevent, or recover from burnout. So we do leader burnout retreats at TC3 Africa.
Where are you based? Ama, you are digital.
We are digital, yeah, but you can get us on we have a website, www.tc3africa.org.
TC, letter T,
letter C,
and then
letter 3.
And digit 3.
TC3 Africa, yeah. We can be found on 0757 49 6262. We can also be found on hello@tc3africa.org.
Wow.
Yes.
Thank you for that session.
Thank you for having me.
I've been able to benefit from this session.
I'm happy
I
to
don't
hear
take it for
that.
granted. And indeed, let's not just keep it that we deal with it in the month of May, because May is intentionally just to give us that realization on all matters mental, but it should be lifestyle. Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Asante sana. That has been The Leader, courtesy of Catalid and the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. I'm Edmund Mudibo. We thank you for the privilege of your time. See you next week, same time. God bless.